Ross.
The regular meeting of the Annapolis City Council on Monday, May 14th, 2018 will be called to order at 7 p.m. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the invocation given by Mayor Buckley. Please take a moment of silence in memory of City Annapolis employee Lamont Denny Williams, who passed on Saturday, April 28th, 2018.
Mr. Mayor, could we also take a moment to remember former Mayor John Costin, who died last week in Georgia. He was mayor in the early 70s, I believe, left town. He was a young man who was here. He died after 6 weeks of fighting brain cancer.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley.
Here.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Present.
Alderman Pam.
Here.
Alderman Pendel Charles.
Present.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Present.
Alderman Rodriguez.
Present.
Alderwoman Henson.
Present.
Alderman Savage.
Present.
Alderman Arnett.
Present.
Mr. City Attorney, please read the first item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended to withdraw Ordinance O-1318, City Emblems Prohibited Use, and R-9-18, City Emblems Prohibited Uses, fine on second reader.
So moved.
Second.
That's right.
We do too.
All those in favour, aye? No?
Aye.
Motion passes. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
I believe the next item on the agenda is the mayor's update.
Good evening. I have just a few messages before we begin our meeting tonight. First, I would like to express on behalf of the city our condolences on the death of Lamont Denny Williams, who died on April 28th. Denny has been a public works maintenance worker since 2004. His sudden death at the age of 48 was a big loss for David Gerald, his crew members in public works and the city. Rest in peace, Denny. Our thoughts are with your friends, family and crew members. Also, I would like to share the sad news that former two-term Mayor John Apostle has passed away. He died on Wednesday at his home in Georgia. John was the city's first full-time mayor who served between 1973 and 1981. John's parents and grandparents, who were immigrants like myself to Annapolis, hailed from Greece, and ran a restaurant in the site of now Middleton's Tavern, where I got my first job when I came to town. John was a graduate of Annapolis Public Schools and the University of Maryland, as well as an Army veteran. John was a beloved member of the strong Greek community in Annapolis. And Janice Hayes Williams has told me that he may have been the best dancer in the history of the city of Annapolis, and she knows her history. Our thoughts are with John's wife Wilda, his son Christopher, and daughter Angela, and his grandchildren. Yesterday was Mother's Day, and I would like to publicly recognize my mum back in Australia, and my mum in Annapolis, Mrs. Williams, who's probably watching now. And of course, my beautiful wife Julie, who gave me my life's two greatest gifts, my sons Dash and Miles. This year as mayor and last year's election were incredibly stressful for Julie. Frankly, I think every day should be Mother's Day. Tonight we honour a very special mum, Miss Verdell Sharps Poindexter. Miss Poindexter, who will be 104 in a couple of months, is unable to be with us this evening, but we have a large crew of family members and friends here tonight. Verdell was born on August 27th, 1914. She graduated from Bowie Normal School in 1932 and taught in a one-room elementary school on the Eastern Shore. After teaching, she began a career as a beautician. She resided at College Creek Terrace until she moved back into the back of her beauty salon on Calvert Street. She was forced out of her house on Calvert Street during what some called urban renewal, but we call it urban removal. She then went on to live and operate her hair salon out of her friend's home in Parole. She continued serving her customers in Parole until she retired in 1990. After a brief stint living in Baltimore with her husband, until he passed in 1991, she returned to Annapolis and moved into assisted living. Miss Poindexter now enjoys her days spending time with her son Charles and her two grandchildren. I would like all of you to please stand who are here to celebrate Miss Poindexter and thank her for being an outstanding mum. A little later on, I'd asked Terry and her granddaughters and Charles to please come forward and accept a City Council citation to honour your mum and grandmother. Please tell her I said Happy Mother's Day. Also, last week was International Institute of Municipal Clerks Week. I know some of you might have missed that because I can't even say it. It's a special opportunity to increase public awareness of the vital services our clerks provide to local government and to the community. I would like to take a few minutes here tonight to thank City Clerk Regina Eldridge for her never-ending support for her never-ending support and guidance of our City Council meetings and legislative process. Personally, for this guy who never served on a PTA, much less served in public office, I depend on Regina and her crew to guide me as I learn how to do this mayor thing. Thank you, Regina, and your crew, Cynthia, Takia, as well as Jackie from the Office of Law. For your continued support of me and the City Council. And finally tonight we will hear the Finance Committee's report on my proposed budget. For the past several weeks, the committee, led by Chairman Ross Arnett and including council members Finlayson and Rodriguez, have been meeting almost daily to review and deliberate the budget. As we work to develop a fiscally responsible budget that provides the services demanded by our city residents. On behalf of us all, I would like to thank the Finance Committee for its work. We're also grateful We're also grateful for the long hours and guidance provided by Nikki Pletzer and Melissa Lehman in the Office of Finance. Melissa, thank you for stepping up as Acting Director of Finance. Our City Manager, Teresa Sutherland, with the assistance of Melissa, has identified $1.4 million of additional revenue income taxes in fiscal year 19, and she is still scrubbing the budget. We will be able to introduce an amendment to my budget that will reduce the proposed tax increase by 2 cents. We look forward to hearing from residents about their budget priorities and ideas as we continue the budget deliberations before our final vote on June 25th. I would like to thank those who are here tonight to share their thoughts and ideas on the budget. We are a community working together to find solutions. As we navigate this process, thank you very much, and I appreciate you giving me a couple of minutes. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is ceremonial items, beginning with ID-155-18, City Council citation to Verdell Sharps Poindexter.
Right, if you guys could come forward. On behalf of the citizens of the City of Annapolis, we are pleased to confer upon you this City Council citation in recognition of your service to the citizens of Annapolis and the residents, your neighbours as a community leader, and to your customers as a long-time beautician in parole. As we honour all of our mothers on this year's Mother's Day, we are especially grateful for you and your family of children and grandchildren as we celebrate your upcoming 104th birthday. This is given under our hand on the Great Seal of the City of Annapolis on the 14th day of May 2018. Thank you so much. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is ID-154-18, the Martha Wood Leadership Award to Miss Amelia Parker.
Ms. Parker, members, please come forward. And Fred, will you come forward with us? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alderman Fred Payon, and I've had the pleasure of working with Ms. Parker on numerous occasions at the Morris Blum Center. we are presenting her this evening with the City Council citation. I thought it was a Martha Wood Award, but that's okay. And let me read it, if you don't mind. On behalf of the citizens of the City of Annapolis, we are pleased to confer upon you this City Council citation in recognition of being selected for the prestigious Martha Wood Leadership Award, showcasing years of your valuable service to the residents of the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis and to the community at large. We applaud your exemplary service and dedication to the residents of the Morris H. Blum Senior Apartments. Appointed as Vice President of the Residence Council in 2015, you made it your goal to improve the quality of life for the residents. In 2016, you were voted President of the Council and initiated many activities for the residents, including Resource Days, Annual Unity Day celebration, Christmas parties, Veterans Day honorees, Valentine's Day dance, holiday cookouts, Black History Month speakers, gospel shows, and fashion shows. She's done a super job on these. I've been there, believe me. She knows exactly what she's doing. In addition, you've volunteered many hours for the annual Thanksgiving dinner and the weekly food giveaways for residents. To further your leadership skills, you currently are participating in the Neighborhood Leadership Academy classes sponsored by Leadership Anne Arundel. We honor you tonight for your dedication to our residents and your contributions to our community, given under our hands and the Great Seal of the City of Annapolis this 14th day of May 2018, signed Gavin Buckley and each and every one of the older persons on the council. Sure, let's get some pictures.
Use the mic.
Amelia, as the president of the Resident Advisory Board, I wanted to present you with the flowers, bouquet, and a congratulations card for all of your very, very hard work, and also to your commitment to the RAD Board. So it's really great working with you, and you keep everybody balanced. So it's great. So thank you so much.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is petitions, reports, and communications, beginning with reports by committees.
Any older person like to present a report? Alderwoman Kendall Charles.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last Monday, the Public Safety Standing Committee met, and we had two outstanding presentations, one from our new city manager, and she welcomed us, and we welcomed her, and she gave introductions and brief remarks, and also we had a presentation from Dr. Pam Brown from Anne Arundel County Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families regarding the Annapolis Collaborative for Change grant. We also had some information supplied to us by the Office of Emergency Management under the Fire Department, as well as the Annapolis Police Department. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is the report from the Finance Committee on the FY 2019 budget and related legislation.
Alderman Arnett, as Chair of the Finance Committee, please present the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank you for presenting the majority of the Finance Committee report and ask if there's any questions. This is the Finance Committee report, labor of a lot of hours and a lot of help from the staff. As might be expected, the Finance Committee focused on the proposal for a major property tax increase, and we looked for ways that we could reduce the rate of increase, that tax increase. And with the help of the city manager, as the mayor mentioned, we found about $2 million, or about 3 cents per hundred reduction in that rate of increase. To highlight some of those items, we made some adjustments to the assumption on attrition in the police department. That's a fairly technical word, but it means the difference between overtime and staffing levels. We also looked at some of the supplemental budget requests from the departments, and we're able to find approximately $137,000 of reductions there, although some of them will be controversial, and I suspect we'll hear from my partner, Mr. Savage, when we get to the council. The major finding was $1.4 million in expected increase in the personal income tax revenues that we'll be getting because of the tax cut legislation passed at the national level. We also spent a lot of time with the Finance Committee looking at the capital improvement program. That's a huge part of the city's portfolio of investments, and we found some changes to make there, the most notable of which are we paid attention to the fact that the city has a schedule of road resurfacing that calls for about 3 miles of resurfacing every year. We have 90 miles of roads, and that is a resurfacing of each road every 30 years. The expected life of roads is about 20 years, so we propose that we increase the money spent on roads from $2 million to $3 million. Those monies are planned to come largely from current revenues rather than bond funding, and we have worked out a schedule on how we pay for that out of the general operating fund rather than out of capital bonds. We also talked about not issuing any new bonds this year. We have a large amount of bonds that are issued and are outstanding but unused at this point, and we think we need to reallocate those bonds to things that need to be used right now and spend those bonds right now. And we tackled 3 important items in the capital improvement budget, which are the Truxton Park pool replacement, the rebricking of Main Street, and plans for the new Department of Works facility. All of those you can find in the council's discussion of the capital improvement program. I want to speak for a moment about what we're hearing from many, and with good cause, and that question is, where are the spending cuts? I and others on the council have not yet decided how we'll vote on this budget when it comes time to do that, but I personally believe that we need to find a mix of new revenues and less spending. I've heard and seen in print that there are many ways to make cuts, but I haven't heard any discussion from the electorate about what cuts we should make, and that's a vital question. So as to how we make the cuts, again, I've heard just making across the board 10% reduction. I have experienced that kind of reduction, or almost experienced it, actually, as a federal worker under the Reagan administration and several other administrations. I actually started under the Nixon administration when some of those cuts. In my experience, across-the-board cuts never really work. They never really achieve what you're after. They're unfair across departments, and you have to adhere to civil service rules and fair labor practices. So you cannot just wave a wand and make those kind of cuts. Moreover, and I think most importantly to this dialogue, those cuts certainly can't be done by the Finance Committee in 1 month. We received the budget. This year we received a very different budget, a very complicated budget, and to expect us to pronounce these kinds of cuts is unwarranted. What we really would value, and I think it really is also in the interest of the citizens, is if you want cuts, you need to tell us what cuts you want, how much you want cut, and what you want cut. You know, there's a whole variety of choices, and there are constituents for every one of those choices for cuts. So I think that it is incumbent on the council, and I have tried to do that in my ward, to make myself available through various forums, the town hall meetings, to hear about the cuts, and I think we'll be willing to hear about those cuts. But if you want us to make cuts, we're all ears, but you need to step up. It's not good to come in the 11th hour when we're ready and must pass a budget and tell us about make cuts, but don't tell us what to cut, and those sorts of things. I want to take a moment to thank the members of the Finance Committee for all your time and effort. Definitely want to thank the city staff, especially Teresa Sutherland, Nikki Putzer, and Melissa Lehman, and Chief Stokes, who is not here but was here, and not only was he a guiding light, but he provided breakfast for the Finance Committee almost every day, and we really do appreciate that. So we understand how many hours and how many late nights the staff have put in order to help us produce this document, and we very much appreciate your work in support of not only the committee, but in support of the city. So thank you very much. I assume soon the committee's report will be up online. As you can see, if you want to print it out, it'll kill a few trees, and then we will thankfully turn this all over to our colleagues, and we certainly will be available and willing to participate in any conversations you would like to have with the committee, and as we move towards passing a final budget in June. Thank you.
Finlayson? Oh, sorry, attorney, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I make a suggestion that we put that committee perhaps on the homepage, on the city homepage, or whatever's easiest? Who's saying yes? Who said yes? Susan? Okay.
Takia, I'm so sorry. I forgot you on the list of thank yous. Takia sitting right there, day in, day out, keeping us on track, keeping us on record, and I apologize, but we all thank you very much. We're very grateful for your help.
Yep, thank you, Alderman Attorney. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is comments by the general public.
During the comments by the general public, the public may speak on any item not scheduled for public hearing tonight. Legislation scheduled for public hearing is O-1818, Public Service Title 16 Code Amendments, ID 140-18, City of Annapolis Constant Yield Tax Rate, Proposed Real Property Tax Increase, O-16-18, Annual Operating Budget Fiscal Year 2019, O-1718 capital budget fiscal year 2019, R-13-18 capital improvement fiscal year 2019-2024, R-1418 positions, classifications and pay plan, R-1518 FY 2019 fees scheduled effective July 1, 2018, and R-1618 FY 2019 fines schedule effective July 1, 2018. We have one speaker tonight, Steve Rogers. Please come forward, state your name and address.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman, Alderman. I'm not speaking on any one of the agenda items, but it kind of touches the basis, and I apologize, Mark, you don't have a copy of my paper, and neither does the city manager. But what I'm trying to do is get you all to look at this thing differently. Okay. This means you look at the city like a system. There's all little tiny pieces. I have 3 master's degrees, and one of my master's degrees was at Johns Hopkins University, and I figured out how to turn their red ink into black ink. I turned around their deficit, their monthly deficit, in 3 months at Johns Hopkins Hospital University System by going into a clinic, picking it apart, look at their billing. Billing is a disaster in the medical world. And what did I find out? I found out that they could get their money, instead of going in boxes for a year and then putting in the shredder, I found out they could get their money in 14 days for 25 cents a bill. So this is called synthesis. You take it apart, look at the parts, figure out how to fix the parts, and put them back together. So I've given you a little paper on some ideas that Mr. Arnett gave me a heads up about tonight. Changing the pension system. Oh, can't do that. Examine every piece of the revenue, every piece of expenditure, justifying and having the mayor say, this is our mission in the city of Annapolis. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do A, B, C, and these are our needs. And then there's a bunch of nice to haves. And then there's a bunch of goodies over here. So you got to separate this into the must have, the nice have, and the goodies. And pretty soon, when you start doing this sorting process, you'll come up with a way to do this. And so I'm suggesting a radical approach. The mayor puts the city automatically in receivership. You get 5 trustees, and the 5 trustees are on payroll for 2 to 3 months, and they get paid, and they have access to every department. They study it, pick it apart, and justify every nickel that's spent. And then they come back to you and tell you, this is how you're going to run the city. Now, you may think I'm a little strange. You're looking at me like that. That's the only way you're going to fix this rolling disaster. You got to take it apart, put it back together, and take the politics out of it. Unless you do this, you're going to have another loan in August to pay for the paychecks that are coming up in September. You're going to roll it over to the next year, and we get more and more debt. So I suggest you kind of look at my paper with some kind of interest. It's not the way to do it. So I ask you to do something called introspection. Introspection is you look at your problem, what's going on with you. So this is the city. Look at what's going on in the city. Look at what's broken. Come up with minute, item by item fixes Then you do a bottoms-up budget, and lo and behold, you may find another couple million dollars. And I would suggest that if you've just found $2 million you didn't know you had, it's really busted. Any questions? I volunteered to be one of the trustees. I saved my fraternity in college because the food was going out the back door. We were feeding the neighborhood. We ate hot dogs for a month, and I saved the fraternity. I took 20 years worth of studies of the DOD, and I came up with a way to save money with our 73 laboratories for the President's Science Advisor. And I turned around Johns Hopkins. So this can be done. I'm just nobody, but I'm using a strategy. I'm using proven scientific principles about how to address a problem. You can apply it to anything, but it works. Trust me. Doesn't have to be brutal, can be realistic, but this is the way you gotta do it. You'll never find the answer unless you do this. Any questions? Ross.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just given this a quick read, Mr. Rogers, and certainly there are questions in here that we've been asking ourselves. I think that one of the things that is the promise of the new city manager is these are questions that she also has been asking and has brought on.
Congratulations.
She hasn't really started to work hard yet. But I guess this notion of receivership does sound pretty radical. I mean, how does one go about doing that?
It's
You just declare
independent.
it?
Okay, they're autonomous, and they're gonna tell you and the mayor how to fix your city. And this is the only way that you can take the politics and rip it off your jacket and make something happen, because every one of you's got constituents, right? And they're all gonna have their special interests. So the mayor maybe wants to set an agenda, missions for the city, who he's gonna take care of, who he isn't, who's on the dole, who isn't, where all the fat cats are. He's gonna say, this is my mission, okay? With that mission, tell me how to take this apart and put it back together. And it's separate from the politics. And you've gotta find people with integrity, people with real experience, like myself, and I owe nobody nothing. And I'll tell you the truth. The reason why Casper Weinberger hired me, because I told him the truth. And I saved the government $8 billion all by myself. So this is something you gotta embrace, look at seriously. You can do it. The methodology is similar to what my paper says, but then you have to kind of write a process and follow it. But it's very effective if you use it. There's
Alderman
hope.
Payon.
There's hope.
Do you think it makes any difference whether we have a city manager form of government versus a weak mayor, city council form of government that we have right now? Frankly, that would seem to play into what you're talking about here.
Well, what's necessary is to have it efficient, effective, and cost-effective. So maybe the challenge to everybody that works in the city or is on the council has to have a better defined purpose and mission, and it's producing something. Think every one of you should be every department head should be a profit center. You should be trying to make as much profit for the city as possible with fees. And then if you're not producing anything, what part of the budget are you using and using well? Okay, and so the city manager, her job is going to be to make things work together more efficiently and not to waste time and energy. And when you walk into the permits department and you wait 6 weeks to get a phone call on your application, she ought to be all over that permits desk and say, why aren't you calling them back in a week? So efficiency, honesty, truth, good use of our money. I've never liked, I've been here 38 years.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there is anyone else present like to speak, please come forward.
My name is Peter Bittner. I live in the Eastport section of Annapolis. I've communicated with Ross on some of these budget issues. I'm offended that the first thing we've heard about this budget process is the increase in expenses, the increase in taxation. It's not rational. Some of us have worked in private corporations and nonprofits and other forms of government. When you have a budget crisis, you look at everything. You look at reductions, you look at deferred expenditures, you look at what you can postpone, and you look at increases. If you're a competitive enterprise, you can't just increase your price. There are consequences for that. If you're a government, you can't just increase the taxes without due consideration to the services. I understand that. I also understand the structural deficit issue, the need to address that. But there have to be some place that you can cut. And the reason you make a broad statement for a potential 5 or 10 or 15% cut is because people can't make the hard decisions, department by department. So you do it in a uniform basis. It's not necessarily the best approach, but it gets the job done in the short term. I just implore the council and the new staff, and I appreciate the learning curve that entailed, to take a look at these cuts. Further, I would say it's very difficult for the citizens to advise on what services the citizens want to be cut. Certainly what we see are police and fire every day. We don't want those cut, but there are many others that potentially could be cut. Many of the citizens, however, just don't have the insight to offer those observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Alderman Arnett?
So as you said, we've been having a dialogue back and forth, and I agree that it is our job to direct where cuts might be made. But one of the things that I've found in my long time on the council is there is a constituency for everything the city does. There's a constituency for recreation, for parks, for transportation. Of course, there's a huge constituency for police and fire, and I don't think people really reflect on it too often, but probably the most important thing the city does for us is to bring clean water in and take dirty water out. And when you talk about doing an across-the-board cut for the big departments, like police and fire, you could expect them to maybe absorb it, but when we asked the fire chief, can you take some cuts, he said, which fire station do you not want me to run ambulance service out of? You know, it is very hard. I mean, it's much harder, believe me, because I've been looking at this for quite a while, to get down into that level. And I think that doing cuts, it has to be both strategic but also surgical. And the example that I gave about under the Reagan administration, when he did an across-the-board cut, and it came to my component, we all, as civil servants, sat there and said, how many years of service do you have? I got you. You're going to go before me. And what happens is, because of the way civil service works, the people that are senior, who are the higher paid people, have the seniority, and so it trickles down. This is an example where trickle down really does work to the newest people, the lowest paid people. And the problem with that is twofold. You might be getting rid of some of your up and coming people, but also because they're lesser paid, you have to cut more of them to get to the desired budget cut. So, I understand what you're asking us to do, and believe me, we do agonize about it. And maybe Mr. Rogers has the right idea. Maybe we have to have some outside force, but it just isn't as simple. And one of the things that I admit we, as a council, have a hard time doing is coming up with those priorities. And that's why in my remarks, I was begging you all, you the taxpayers, you the recipients of these services, you got to give us some clues. You got to tell us, I don't value this. Now, what you don't value, somebody else may. And we actually put something in the budget to start a citizen survey where we're going to try to collect information from the citizens over time about the city services and about how much they're valued. So we're not insensitive to this need to do it, but believe me, it just isn't. It's easy to flick that switch that raises the revenue or lowers the revenue, but raises the revenue. It's much harder to get into and much harder to trace through all the implications of the civil service system and the negotiated contracts. What Mr. Rogers said about pensions and employee benefits, we can start now with a policy of all new employees will go to a defined contribution plan. And that may greatly reduce the number of new employees we'll attract, which almost by itself will cut costs. But the thing that really struck me, and I've waited a long time to be Finance Committee Chairman, is this is really overwhelming, and with all the new stuff this year, particularly overwhelming, to try to get done in a month. And we're just not set up to make cuts in a month. The council can't do it. We don't have the resources. We don't have the knowledge. And again, as Mr. Rogers said, I think we need to start right after the budget is passed, planning for 2020 and surveying you all to find out what it is. We know you don't want to pay more, but we don't know what it is you want to give up. And we've got to have some basis for getting into that. So that's my question.
So fair enough. I appreciate the difficulty and the challenges and the time requirement. Mr. Kardash had a letter suggesting the equivalent of a federal government continuing resolution. That may not be legal at the city level, I don't know. An alternative is for the council to pass an identical budget to last year, the current year, with an agreement that some months will be spent making the study that gets to the department by department surgical cuts.
Right.
4 months out, or whatever that might be. And then you do a budget amendment that would have the benefit of looking at some realistic cuts.
A good point, and not to prolong this debate much longer, but 5.5 cents of the mayor's proposed budget is to get at the structural deficit component. If we just perpetuate last year's budget, we perpetuate that structural deficit. We perpetuate budgeting for what we want the departments to spend versus what they actually are spending. So we had proposed cutting taser cartridges from the police enhancement budget. And they said, well, you can cut it, but we still have to have that for our tasers. So we'll spend it. And so I think one of the other things that we are just beginning to talk about in the Finance Committee is this is as much a management issue as it is a budget issue. And that's one of the other things we really have to work on. But the other big increase items are $2 million of new debt service. Now that's sins of the past. We probably have issued too many bonds for things that we should have been more prudent about. But those kinds of things are upon us. There's about $1 million that we're setting aside for the union negotiations. There's a little more than $1 million we have to add to the budget because of the increase in healthcare costs for our employees. A lot of these things, when we got into it, we just found are not escapable. It is true, and this is what really bothers me a lot, is that we are, in this budget, choosing to solve all problems by raising taxes rather than finding things that we should stop doing. And as I've said before, finding those things is a long process and won't happen in this budget. There's no way it can happen in this budget, but it does mean that we have to feel the pressure, and you have to keep the pressure on us to do those things.
Okay, more emails coming.
All right, thank you. I appreciate your emails.
Thank you, Peter. Would anyone else like to speak? Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name's Tricia DeLuca. I live in Eastport. Kind of new to this. I just have a quick question. How many employees are there in the city of Annapolis, and how does that compare to other cities of this size?
I think we have our own police force and fire department, and that sort of puts our number up compared to comparable cities, I'd say. Ross would be more of an expert on that, 800 and so.
Actually, I'm not an expert because I don't know how to answer that question. We've been asking it. And there's varying counts. When we did the class and comp study that was based on 494 employees, when I try to add up what I think are in each of the departments, I come up with more like 610. There are complications because if you have a regular hourly employee that works a full week, you can, and they have a number, you can count them. But when you have seasonal people, summer people, part-time people, that's a little tougher to calculate, but we used to get it. Up until about 2013, 2014, that was just part of our budget book. It would have the FTEs and it would have it allocated by department. But so, I mean, I think I know approximately how many people, but I cannot tell you, and I do not have information that says what that number is for the city. And we did ask for it.
So is there some way to study that, and what are the expenditures for the city of Annapolis versus other cities of this size? Is our budget considerably higher? I mean, have you guys looked into things like that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if her question is being addressed, and Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a very simple question, is how does our budget compare to comparable cities in the country? And I believe that our budget should be formatted so that an answer to your question is quite simple, and I believe that's the intent in the next year, to restructure our budget so that we're able to make those comparisons and measure efficiencies, et cetera. So I don't believe we have the question answered today, unfortunately.
And actually, when we did the pro forma budget, the departments had to allocate their spending programs by FTEs. That's the last time we had a firm FTE count, and we stopped doing that a few years ago.
Alderman Payon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You and Alderman Arnett kind of hit the nail on the head with one of the problems we have in developing a budget. I don't think anybody right now knows the answer to that very simple question, how many employees we have. That is going to end under our the city manager that we've hired, I'm quite sure. In terms of how much we spend, well, that depends on whether you consider inflation, cost of living, that sort of thing, but I think we're a little higher. We have, by most counts, between a little bit over 600 full-time employees with, I think it was 100 to 125 for part-timers, which would include summer help, temporaries, that sort of thing. The city of Rockville, Gaithersburg, Bowie, all cities that have a bigger population than we do have a budget that is lower than ours. They have far fewer employees. However, they don't have full coverage from their police or fire departments. As a matter of fact, I don't think several of those cities even have fire departments. They are not the county seat, the capital of the state, and nor are they the seat, as we are very proudly, of the United States Naval Academy, which involves an awful lot of time from the city. I mean, not that much time, believe me, but that certainly is a consideration. And the academy does pay us. Whether they pay us exactly what we spend is a little bit in question at the moment, but they certainly do take care of some of their expenditures at a minimum, and they may very well take care of all of them. We're not exactly sure at this point. But your question is a good one. I wish we all had better answers, because you're asking questions we'd like to know the answer to, and we don't at the moment.
Alderwoman
So-
Pindell Charles? Or-
Kind of two of you have mentioned the fire and ambulance type things. So I don't know the answer to this, but just, when I'm out driving, if there's a fender bender somewhere, it seems like both a full fire truck and an ambulance shows up at the scene. And it's just a little fender bender, and the people are just standing there, everybody's fine. So, I mean, places like that, you're looking for places to cut. Is that potentially something? I mean, does a full fire truck and a full ambulance need to show up every single time?
Well, there's a reasonable explanation, at least that we've been giving, about the fire truck, and that is all firefighters are cross-trained. The people that put out your fire may also show up in an ambulance.
But so why are there both? Why is there a fire truck and an ambulance? I mean, if they're
Because-
cross-trained, then...
Because they have to send 3, 4 people out, typically on a call. They don't know what they're going to find when they get there. If there is a fire call in the meantime, they can't really, time-wise, afford to go all the way back to the station, hop on a fire truck at that point. The fire truck gets used right away, and that does happen when they are out on a call for paramedics. That is the explanation that we've been given, at least the last one that I've been given. And like you, I'm very skeptical about that. The fact is, it does use up more gasoline, it does use up some other things, but it's not altogether unjustified, let me put it that way. In each and every case, maybe not, but by and large, there's a good reason why it's done that way, so we've been told.
Wish Chief Stokes was here. He was here
Yes.
last week, and he would give us the
bet he's
full
glad
answer to
he's
that.
not.
Alderwoman Pindell Charles?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things, ma'am. It is my understanding that the last question that you asked has a lot to do with state and federal regulations. Much of that has to do, and a lot of it circles around liability. A lot of regulations, whether it's the state or the federal government, they have to deploy certain pieces of equipment in certain situations. If not, there's a potential for liability. The other thing is, I know that the Annapolis Fire Department had worked for years to become a Class 1 fire department, and that happened last year. They've gone through a lot of protocol and a lot of things that they had to do to get there. On the flip side of that, we all received letters, I believe, that indicate, based on being a Class 1 fire department, that our insurance rates are adjusted because of that. And I'm going to bring up the same point that Alderman Payon brought up earlier. Because we are the capital city of Maryland, also the county seat, we have a lot more responsibilities than maybe other jurisdictions and other cities do in the state of Maryland. We have a lot more going on. Also, since, of course, 9/11, we're strategically between Baltimore and Washington, which puts us in a situation that may not occur in some other places. We have the U.S. Naval Academy, as Alderman Payon indicated. So there are a lot of things that Annapolis incurs that other cities and jurisdictions around our state and even in other parts of the country that do not incur. And we have to be very cognizant of those things when we're looking at a budget. These folks have spent hours and days and weeks and months looking at this budget, and we thank Ms. Sutherland for being here. So we're doing and looking and still looking, but we do have to also, on the flip side, look at what we must do as far as whether state or federal regulations or laws or statute that we must follow. There's no getting around that. Thank you.
Alderman Arnett?
Mr. Kardash is in the audience, and he can tell you how hard it is to do an apples-to-apples comparison of one city to another. Rockville, for example, has its own police force, but it also gets policing from the county. And the same thing with fire departments. We've also tried to look at similar cities to ours across the nation. Capital cities, small capital cities on the water with institutions of higher education. But it really is something that you actually have to hire someone to do, somebody qualified, and make that comparison. And quite honestly, we've just never gotten around to doing it, and I think maybe it is time that we do that. So your question is well asked. I think that there's some indication in the approximations that we can get that we do have more staff than others, and I don't know whether being the state capital and county seat and the home of the Naval Academy fully explains it. We recently we're working on a classification and compensation system that is trying to look at how our employees are classified versus employees in comparable jurisdictions around us, and also how they're paid, and that's still a work in progress. We haven't gotten it as quickly as I would have liked, and I think that it still needs some refinement, but that is one of the steps that was actually started under the last administration to try to look at how we compare. So there's work to be done there.
Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Is there anyone else present who would like to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I was not intending to speak at this part of the session, but so many questions popped up that I thought maybe I could share a little bit of information. In response to Peter Bittner's questions, and in response to the young lady who just spoke before, just by comparison, the city of Rockville, which has a population of 68,000 as of last year, has 518 employees. That's as of tonight, or at least as of the website I checked tonight. The city of Annapolis, I'm told, has 570 full-time equivalents and another 150 part-time. So approximately 720 employees who work in various capacities, some are part-time, full-time. The other question, which I thought was, I just happened to bring this tonight, not intending to use it, but, and this was a report that I did back in for FY 2010, so 8 years ago. But to give you an idea of just perspective, the city of Rockville at the time had 64,000 people, and now 68,000, spends $1,418 per capita on services. Gaithersburg, with a population then of 52,000, spends $782 per person. Bowie, our nearby neighbor, with 56,000 residents, spends $689 per capita. But interestingly, Annapolis, with 38,000 residents, spends $1,705 per resident. So from a proportional perspective, the city spends way more, in fact 20% more than Rockville, which is almost 100% larger than the city of Annapolis. By example, Rockville has something like 150 miles of roadway. We have less than 10. So, and I just happen to see that their public works department has 43 people. I don't know what ours, I think ours is in the 20, 30 range, but 43 people for 150 miles of roadway. So and those are just some of the just some of the comparisons. When we did take a look at this a few years ago, we looked at, and also, by the way, Rockville happens to be the county seat of Montgomery County, so it shares the same privilege with the city of Annapolis. No, it's not the state capital, we can only have one of those, but it's not like Gaithersburg, which tends to be more of a bedroom community. The city of Rockville does have its own police department. It's supplemented by Montgomery County. They don't have their own fire department. That's provided by Montgomery County. They don't have their own bus service, much like Annapolis does. They use Metro Transit. So there are benefits that they have on a regional basis, which the city here has capitalized on a local basis. So, as an example, we have our own bus company, they don't. And, you know, as I was listening to some of the discussion that led up to this, my good friend Ross was talking about some of his mental reservations about across-the-board cuts. And I would suggest that I think you have to put those 35-year-old fears aside, and if in fact you have to attack the budget on an across-the-board basis, then you do it. Because as Mr. Rogers had said beforehand, I don't know if the city has to go into receivership, but by example, the city of Detroit was saved from bankruptcy by exactly that operation. They put a bankruptcy attorney in charge who has turned the city around dramatically. I'm not suggesting that we're at that point, but the idea is this concept of tough love, if you will, which you'll hear later. But, you know, I think you do have to take some very harsh measures if you're going to fix the problem. I was pleased to hear that Ms. Sutherland has found $2 million in her 2 weeks on the job. Just imagine what she could do in a full year. And so I hope, you know, I hope that she'll get the opportunity to really dive in. I'm confident that she will find more. And I think, you know, from across the board perspective, virtually every organization has 5 to 10% of dead wood. Let's call it what it is. And they can be positions that can be riffed out. They can be positions that can be combined. They can be positions that can be outsourced. All of those have to be looked at if we're going to fix the problem. This is like Groundhog Day. I've seen this movie over and over again, and every time I come here, this is like my spring sport. I come here because I really care about what's going on in the city, and unfortunately, the anxiety that goes with seeing the eight council members and the 3 finance members attack the budget in a short period of time is crazy. There's no way on earth that they can go through a $100 million budget knowledgeably, no matter how much staff time is devoted to it, in a 2-month period and come out with reasonable recommendations. But I'll save that for my next testimony. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Oh, Bill? Mr. Kardash? Mr. Kardash? Alderman Pendle Charles?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Kardash, we've had several conversations and communication about this, and I think at this point, I'm going to get a little personal. When my dad had his heart attack at home, I was so pleased and proud of the response time of our emergency response teams to our home. I know for a fact, I work in the county, that same response would not have been there if I had to wait. Rightly so, because they cover a lot of ground. The county fire department. When my mom was going through some dementia and Alzheimer's issues and we had to call emergency response, there were actually gentlemen there who knew my mom, who she taught at Bates High School, who were able to talk to my mother and talk to us about a situation that was going on. I don't think I could, I know I couldn't have found that with the county police department. So at some point, I think it gets personal with our own situations, and we thank God that the people who were there, whether they're our neighbors, whether they're people we went to school with, they're familiar faces that help us through trauma, that help us through tough times, that allowed my parents to live to the age of 90, both of them, with a father who had been diabetic for 45 years and a mother who had Parkinson's for almost 30 years, and me being an only child. For me, it meant a lot seeing those people come to my home, to my parents' home, to do what they needed to do and to ease our minds regarding that. But I just thought I had to say this tonight because I know we're all going through this exercise and these surgical cuts and looking at every ounce of the budget, but sometimes it does get personal. But I thank you so very much for coming here and for all the work that you've done on behalf of our citizens. We appreciate it.
You know, I think in the comment that you make, one of the comments that was made earlier was the city identifying core services and what I'll call quality of life services. And so, police and fire, I think, are pretty fundamental to what we do. No one's suggesting that we get rid of police and fire. But whether those services are outsourced to, or shared, partnered with the county, we very successfully, 5-6 years ago, outsourced trash collection. I mean, I don't even notice the difference. And I don't really want to, debate this point with you, but I'm just trying to respond to you. I think fundamental to what every city, what every citizen expects is a strong police and fire department. I don't think we're challenging that. But whether they show up in a fire truck or they show up in a suburban vehicle makes a big difference from a cost perspective, and that's not even being addressed.
I think
So
some
thank
of
you.
it too is we recognize it in the county. I know the fire department is getting a huge raise over the next several months, and just having been a prosecutor for 20 and a half years, I recognize what that means as far as whether it's the police department or a fire department or what it may be when we have, I don't want to use the word competition, but when we have to look at what the surrounding jurisdictions are doing as well, that's extremely important. When we train folks and then we realize that they're, and rightly so, they've got families to feed and all, when they move on to other jurisdictions. As far as the trash is concerned, talk to my Ward 3 residents. Different story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Please state your name and address.
Carol Kelly, I didn't sign up to speak, but given the in-depth approach that you're taking to this budget already, I did want to come forward as a member of the Annapolis Transportation Board and encourage you all to look again at the possibilities for efficiency and cost saving in further planning and operation of that system. Several years ago now, at least 2 or 3, there was a fairly earnest effort to participate in regionalization of transportation services, and for various reasons that I really am not knowledgeable enough to report back on. Some of my colleagues on the board are much more expert in the field than I am. Nevertheless, we as a city, I think, did not take advantage of that opportunity. My citizen and gut level sense at that time was that we wanted our own bus system in our own town, and we weren't going to do what I think I heard people referring to in this session right now, county and city cooperation, resulting in considerable benefit and cost savings to the city. Rockville was the name that that was referenced in one of your comments either, or maybe Mr. Kardash's comments. So look again at transportation and look at it, and this I do say as an earnest and long-lasting board member, look at it with serious structural attention. The transportation department planner, a young man of considerable expertise and ability, Ian, what was Ian's last name? An
Banks.
Englishman.
Banks.
Has not been replaced, and he contributed a great deal of knowledge and outside familiarity with grants and things like that. And although I am on the transportation board and have been for years because I am a bus rider, which some of you know, I don't even own a car. I make too much use of my son's, however, but I know how important public transportation is in this town. I know how important it is in general. I'm an idealist about public transportation. So I don't want to argue for any reduction in the service, but there are certainly many ways that it can be improved in town, whether at the city level or at some cooperative level with a larger regional group. So I'm not arguing for cutting transportation in any way, but I do urge you to look, with department input at other ways that you could go as a city to make it a more efficient and therefore a less costly venture. One of the things that has always mystified me is that there is some connection, and I guess the manager will see this eventually, between the need, the financial need of the Annapolis bus system and it's the deficit that that need produces. And the way in which it is negotiated on a budgetary yearly operating budget way was much too complex for my non-financial mind. But I gathered from both Rick Gordon and the previous department head, and certainly from the planner who was here, from Ian, and now from Kwaku, that with some serious attention, this financial aspect of the transportation system could be a cost-saving measure. So I'm just arguing for you to look harder at that.
Carol, sorry.
Yeah.
Alderman Arnett.
So I'm glad you brought that up. In fact, I have been having some discussions with the Director of Transportation in the county, and it is something we have to look at. But I am so glad we didn't join the RTA, because that has failed miserably in the county, and in fact is why the county is interested in discussing with us again a potential partnership. We have the kinds of buses they need, and we have the number of drivers they need. So I think that is very much one of the things that we need to be considering. However, that's not something we can do in a one-month
No,
budget
I'm not arguing for
exercise.
that. I'm simply coming forward to call it to your attention for
Right,
your,
no, so
for your
we-
tenures.
We do. The one worry is that, and maybe you want to speak to this, Rob, about we don't actually drill down enough for some of our citizens, like at Bay Woods, that really need transit. They don't have vehicles, and I'm worried about, if we partner with the county, are we going to draw resources away from our transit system with all of its foibles and make things worse for people who really need transit? So as I said before, when you make cuts, it has to be strategic and surgical, and it's tough to do. And maybe, I mean, should we all quit our jobs and become receivership? I mean, I'm volunteer for that right now.
But given the volume, the amount of money that's involved in public transportation, I can't believe that a really serious and enlightened examination of that expenditure wouldn't be productive. And I agree that it turned out to be fortunate that we didn't get into that particular regionalization, but I hope that we won't have the parochialism that we had at that time to shy away from these overtures from the region, because we are Annapolis, and so thank you.
Alderwoman Tierney. Sir, Carol, sir. Oh, you good? Okay. Alderman Savage.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And
You told me.
Carol, thank you for your years of service on the Transportation Board. And like Ross said, a number of us do want to take a look at our options for the Transportation Department, and also to Mr. Kardash's comments, we want to look at some of the other departments just to find out what our options are. I do support the transportation. We need to be providing transportation, especially in my ward. We have a large number of seniors, and to Ross's point, I don't think they're not all equally served under the current model. It needs to change. I mean, we are subsidizing our transportation department in the neighborhood of, I think it's about $2.5 million, if I'm not mistaken, that we subsidize the department with. So that's just, it's not sustainable. We need to find a model, and we're providing transportation for a large part of the county, and that's not really fair for us to be burdened with that. But again, like you said, we can't do that in a month, but hopefully we can get your help.
Well, the Transportation Board will be very grateful if you will take a more serious look at
anything
at the
the
issue.
board can provide, any assistance you can provide would be helpful.
And
Thank you.
and Alderman Tierney is a member of the board,
Yeah.
or a participant in the board, so thank you for coming.
Oh, I just wanted to add that I think in this budget, thank you, Carol, very much. As head of the Transportation Committee, this has been frustrating for me because it is a budget issue, but I think at a minimum what we can do is analyze the system we have right now and optimize it in the sense of how can we make that existing system better. And I'm also looking at adequate facilities. It's transportation, public transportation is not addressed in adequate facilities. If we have a development coming up we should look at, is it available, you know, is there a transit stop available? Adding stops is not something that is restricted, you know, on the budget issue. I mean, these are inexpensive solutions to elevate our transit. Because I feel strongly that our transit system is sort of this stepchild. You go to another city and everyone takes the bus. Here, it seems like it's, you know, it's just not looked at that way.
Well, and as a rider, I can testify that you get a sense when the big buses come to town. You know, I rode the Dillon bus for much of my life here in Annapolis, and now there are buses coming from Baltimore. There are, what else am I thinking of? Just the MTA buses themselves from Baltimore. You know, the big boys roll into town. The serious transportation system rolls up and down the streets, and then our poor, you know, as you say, stepchildren are plodding away, trying to pick up here and pick up there and take care of, obviously, a very needy sector of the population. So I think it could be an exciting challenge for you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. We need a comprehensive plan. Thank you. Anyone else present who would like to speak?
Hello, good evening. I'm going to speak now instead of later so I can leave. I'm Debbie Yatsuk, Ward 5. And I haven't been here for a while, but it's the same story at my end, talking about the same situation with the city. I'm very disappointed to have to be here and to hear that over and over for over 30 years I've been following the city and living here, and we have the same problem with the budget. Nobody ever seems to know what's going on. You know, we have new people, we have old people, but I also know citizens who seem to know more than our new and old people in your desks. So that's concerning, that's disappointing, it's embarrassing as a capital city to watch you on TV and have to have a second glass of wine because it's so disappointing, the lack of knowledge and the lack of preparation and the promises that we're going to do better next year. I know you're all good. The ones I know of you, I know you're good. Your heart's in the right spot, but really over and over and over the same issues with living within our means. As a new council, it's important to build trust. You're spending other people's money. I and others feel, Mr. Mayor, you have not shown appropriate discipline by asking for taxpayers to do without so that you can do, such as adding staff. I've seen the charts with Bill Kardash, Julie Mussug. We've looked at the charts for 10, 20 years. We see the numbers. Too many staff being paid too much money for positions in other cities and counties that are run well, doing well with less. For 23 years, I was a department manager in the city of Bowie, and maybe I'm realizing tonight that there is a correlation. I've also been on committees for a city manager, a true city manager form of government here, and nonpartisan elections. Tonight, I'm merging those into economics. I really hadn't done that before. But a true city manager form of government, which Mayor Buckley, you had said during the campaign that you would do that, and since you have backed off on that, it was at a debate at one of the schools, and everybody but Nevin Young said they would back a city manager form of government. A true city manager form of government lets the city run efficiently, as has been said prior. That is a trained person, whether by experience or whether by books. They handle your priorities. The elected officials are super important. You still guide the direction of the city. You still are responsible for what the people want you to do. You are still the voice. You're still the presence. But a professional city manager will work with the department heads, will work with the staff. They will take your priorities, they will take your missions, they will take your obligations that you have said to your constituents, and they will enact them efficiently and effectively. They will work with the department heads who will work with the staff. Nonpartisan elections, maybe that has an economic fallout. You know, right now, I mean, I know the mayor and some of you were pushed around during elections with what you could say and what you could do. Promises were made. You know, now that you're here, you want to keep promises, some of them. But nonpartisan elections, like the city of Bowie, is healthy. As a staff member, I worked with the city manager. I knew all of you. You all came into the office. I didn't even know what you were. I didn't care. We all wanted what was best for the constituents of the city of Bowie. I ran 14, as recreation director, I ran 14 major events. I managed a performing arts playhouse. I put on concert series. I managed all the school, county, and city gyms and ball fields. Now, what helped me, no paid staff helped me, but I had citizen committees. We had a civic affairs committee. We had a recreation committee. We had an arts committee. They were volunteer citizens who were my right hand. So we sat every month at meetings. They came up with ideas. I came up with ideas. I handled the implementation as a paid staff member. They handled outreach. They worked the event the day of. No problem. We certainly don't need an artist on staff. We don't need more special. I appreciate the special event background that you want to bring. It's great. But even as I think I saw in the paper that an artist said, look, we have a lot of artists here in the city. Let us do it. We're doing it. We can do more. Let's talk. But you don't need to hire a new artist to be on city staff when we have so many in the city. So, yeah, nonpartisan elections and a true city manager form of government. And it just means the mayor would be part-time. You wouldn't have to be full-time, but you would still be important. You know. So I pulled out one of these quotes in the paper from my alderman, Mark Rodriguez, and he said, no one feels comfortable about such a high tax increase, especially without talking about cuts. There are tough conversations we still have to go into. I did write you yesterday. I've kind of heard that we get a lot of crickets from you, so I'm waiting. I'm hoping for bigger and better. But I also saw here that often the city either waives associated fees or the department does not receive full compensation for the cost of events. These could be events at Lawyers Mall, they could be events at the stadium. I know we are fortunate to be the state and the county and the city seat, but how does it happen where an event that might cost $30,000 for a paid profit-making entity, we pay $30,000 in our city resources, we get paid $4,000 back for a ticketed private event at the stadium? I mean, I was talking to my husband last night, how does that even happen? Where's the chain of events? It's beyond me how that could even happen. So we certainly can capture and should capture from the governor, from the county executive, from the nonprofit rallies. I mean, I'm all for free speech in the First Amendment, but why are they getting free speech and it's not free for me? You know, it's not free for me to let them have free speech because I happen to be one of 38,000 taxpayers in the city. I've talked to other people this week who are on fixed incomes. We have a retired military, a widower. He has a home on Spa Creek. His home has gone up in value. His pension has not. He thought he was going to leave holdings to his children. He may not even be able to stay there. Another woman, so that's in Murray Hill. Another in Admiral Heights, a widow. Her husband passed away, thought he had all his affairs in order, but she has zero extra. Her last tax statement, zero wiggle room. If her property tax bill goes up, she cannot stay. So we are going to alienate a whole class of people who are pushed out of our boundaries. Cuts, legal department, City of Bowie, we had one part-time lawyer. That's it. They didn't even have an office at City Hall because they were part-time, they worked in their firm, and we used them when we needed to. I don't know, do we have, what, 4, 5, 6? Ah, 4. City clerk, we have 1 city clerk. I don't know, what do we have? 3? But you have assistants. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so looking at the chart, and I have a chart from maybe 2010 as well. I thought, Ross, you had it, Julie, Bill, we all worked on it, like 5, 6 pages, and it had the positions and the cost. It's just a matter, it's not rocket science, it's just a matter of going through one by one and evaluating it. And I'm glad Teresa Sutherland's here, what I know I like, and, but it should always be that way. People should always be watching out for the taxpayer. They should always be trying to be efficient and effective, and I'm disappointed if it's not.
Thank you.
That's it. Good?
Nope,
Thank you.
Nope. Thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Anyone else present who would like to speak? Seeing no motion in chambers, I declare comments by the general public closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is an update from the mayor.
That's been updated.
And so then the next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar include journals of proceedings, CCM 040918, regular meeting minutes, CCM 042318S, special meeting minutes, 5:30 p.m. CCM 042318, special meeting minutes. First readers, O-21-18, parking fund appropriations, referred to Finance Committee. O-22-18, food handling establishment, polystyrene food service products prohibition, referred to Environmental Matters Committee and the Housing and Human Welfare Committee. R-18-18, equal protection taxes, and that is the end of the consent calendar items.
Is there any objections to items on the consent calendar?
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Hearing no objection, we move approval of the consent calendar. All those in favour?
Aye.
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 Ayes have it. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckey,
Aye.
Alderman Payon,
Aye.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles,
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson,
Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez,
Aye.
Alderwoman Henson, Alderman Savage,
Aye.
Alderman Arnett,
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is public hearings, beginning with ordinance O-18-18, public services, Title 16, code amendments, for the purpose of transferring the charges for water service from Chapter 16.08 of the Code of the City of Annapolis to the fees schedule, transferring the charges for sewer service from Chapter 16.16 of the Code of the City of Annapolis to the fees schedule, clarifying the council approval process for any rate increases determined to be necessary to cover the cost of water and sewer services, and matters generally relating to charges for water and sewer services.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak? No one has signed up. I declare the public hearing on O-18-18 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is public hearing on ID.140-18, City of Annapolis constant yield tax rate, proposed real property tax increase. For the tax year beginning July 1, 2018, the estimated real property assessable base will increase by 0.93% from $6,581,552,777 to $6,541,823,706. If the City of Annapolis maintains the current tax rate of $0.6490 per $100 of assessment, real property tax revenues will increase by 0.93%, resulting in $391,158 of new real property tax revenues. In order to fully offset the effect of increasing assessments, the real property tax rate should be reduced to $0.6430, the constant yield tax rate. The City of Annapolis is considering not reducing its real property tax rate enough to fully offset increasing assessments. The city proposes to adopt a real property tax rate of $0.7790 per $100 of assessment. This tax rate is 21.15% higher than the constant yield tax rate and will generate $8,895,529 in additional property tax revenues.
No one has signed up to speak. Is there anyone present who'd like to speak on this?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name's Doug Smith. We live at 5 Revel Street. We seem to be touching a lot on different tax issues and budget issues tonight. I agree with Alderman Arnett that 30 days is not enough time to figure out where to make cuts. The problem is we've maybe lived here now too long, because I've heard that for the last 12 years. And it's now the new thing is we're going to start looking at where we could save money after we pass this new tax increase. 2 comments. One, I've run a number of corporations. If my board of directors had asked me, how many employees do you have, Doug? And I couldn't answer that, I'd be gone. So something as fundamental as the number of employees, because we know 85% of our cost is people. Maybe that's not the right grammar. 85% of cost relates to people. And what are we doing? Seems like every cycle we add more personnel. Second point, if we can't find cuts in 30 days, then let's take an approach that allows us to analyze where we could find some savings. And maybe we're now at the tipping point where we need to look at, can we become partners with the county's police department, the county's fire department, the county's park and rec, the county's public works? The county fixes roads like we do. The county has plumbing like we do. All of these things have seemed to be, we never want to touch it. We never hire an analysis of what the cost savings might be. It's almost as if we're afraid of the answer. So let's not go there. Let's not do a study on merging the parks and rec because we don't want to know the number. At some point, people are going to say, that's it. It's too expensive to live in Annapolis. I'm worried about how we are separating the city more and more into the haves and the have-nots. Unless you're very wealthy and can afford to live here and pay a very high tax rate, where does the rest of our population go? I want to have the people that live in it, all of the people that are in Annapolis, to enjoy the city. I've heard us many times say we have a structural deficit. We have a bigger problem. We have an automatic structural solution. What is it? Raise taxes. Now, you'll hear tonight from, already I've heard from some people that have offered their help to find ways to improve the efficiency of this city's government. I have never been asked to participate in a study on how we can improve the efficiency of the city's government. I'm pretty sure Bill Kardash has never been asked, help us find efficiency in the government. There's a lot of people in this city with tons of experience, have managed budgets 10 times bigger than this city's budget, who could be of help. But what do we say? We've only got 30 days. We got to pass this budget by a certain deadline. Once it's passed, all this urgency to find tax savings, the incentives are gone, because now the money is flowing in. We've solved the problem again with our automatic answer of raising taxes. So I would say, if this is the new day, if this is the turning point where we're actually going to look at efficiencies in the government, tap into some of the people here. Volunteers, you can't find better expertise than the people that are in this room or in this city who would do it for free. Thank you. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak?
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. By the way, I thought I did sign up. There were competing
I was coming
signature
to you.
sheets.
We'll give you a second turn.
I know, but it's that invisible ink that I use.
But I appreciate you need to get out of here, so.
Yeah, I know. No, I'm staying the night. So good evening, my name is Bill Kardash. I reside at 1 Acton Place on Ward 1. I'm speaking on behalf of Annapolitans for a Better Community. Last week I forwarded to each of you a guest column I had written for the Capitol. It was published in yesterday's Sunday Capitol. The central point of my column was for the council to not approve the proposed FY 2019 budget, but instead send the budget back to the mayor and the new city manager and the department heads to find spending economies totaling at least $12 million, which equates to most of the $14 million in new spending. The new city manager's skills and experience in scrutinizing budgets should be a big advantage to the process, but it makes no sense at all to do so after the budget's been approved. No rational person would ever expect any serious budget savings to come from a budget approval process after the fact. Mr. Mayor, your recent op-ed claimed you didn't know any tax increase from the new assessments would be phased in, limiting the city's immediate benefit. I mentioned just that fact in a guest column I wrote for the Capitol in mid-December, just 2 weeks after your inauguration. Any homeowner in the city realizes property taxes are phased in over 3 years, presumably to ease the pain. It's the only consideration that accompanies a property tax increase. I'm sure you've heard from taxpayers throughout the city, including many who supported your candidacy, reminding you that you campaigned on the promise of, "I won't raise property taxes." In fact, at the candidates forum at the Annapolis bookstore, I specifically asked you that question. Your response was, "I won't raise taxes, property taxes. In fact, I hope to reduce them." To me, those words seemed convincing. While you may characterize your recent action as making the tough choices, the majority of citizens see it as a broken promise. By the way, just as an aside, some of you may be familiar with an app called Nextdoor, which is throughout the community. It's a national program, but it goes throughout the community. And on the weekend, I posted a poll asking people very succinctly if they approved of the property tax increase. And as of just before I came in this evening, with 130 responses, not exactly an enormous response, but some of you have been elected with less than that. 10% supported the property tax increase, 46% did not support an increase, and 44% supported an increase after spending is cut. Just to give you an idea what the public are thinking. Most troubling, though, is that no attempt has been made to scrutinize the budget, as you had opined, or to follow your suggestion to have your city manager dig deep for economies and efficiencies. By the way, I guess I can update that because I did hear about the $2 million that Ms. Sutherland found, and as I said, if she can find $2 million in a couple of weeks, imagine what she can do with a year's worth of effort. Instead, right out of the gate, you have gone to not just for a tax increase, but the largest property tax increase anyone can remember, and maybe ever. What's that saying? Go large or go home? During the past 6 weeks, the Finance Committee reviewed the budget, but as I've expressed to several of you on multiple occasions, none of you are subject matter experts in a position to know what or how to allocate departmental resources. That can and should only be done by department heads with that expertise. What you have been burdened with is to review enhancements, the need to spend more money and staff. With few exceptions, any changes you recommend are simply nibbling around the edges. So, how can you make an impact today that will fulfill your responsibility to your constituents in every ward? Here are 2 recommendations. 1, pass a continuing resolution to fund the FY 2019 operating budget at the FY 2018 level of $106 million. 2, reject the proposed 2019 budget and send it back to the mayor and city manager for the purpose of reducing the FY 2019 budget. If you want $14 million in new spending, find $14 million in savings or offsets. Both of these initiatives will also manifest themselves by, may I just continue if someone would ask me to, thank you.
Why not?
So most of these initiatives will also manifest themselves by 1, placing an immediate hiring freeze on all position requests for new hires or upgrades. If the city is truly faced with financial problems, why are we expanding staff? 2, defer all pension and OPEB funding for the next 12 months and ask the city manager to find offsetting economies in the operating budget. With an 89% funding rate in the police fire pension fund, we are not at near-term risk of any failure to meet retirement funding. Our funding rate already exceeds that of most cities, and today we are not even close to having a crisis. 3, defer vehicle replacements and purchases. By the way, I think leasing is a good strategy for the future. 4, Mr. Mayor, you need to set the tone for efficiency and economy in the city by withdrawing your request for a 20% increase for staff in the mayor's office. Finally, I endorse 2 recommendations that appeared in the transition team report for finance. First, the city must adopt an anti-deficiency provision in the city code to hold department heads accountable for not exceeding their departmental budgets. Currently, there are no consequences for spending more than has been authorized or budgeted. Second, Mr. Mayor, is to stand up for the taxpayers by stopping the abuse of the city's workers' comp program. When the issue was first discovered during the Cohn administration, it was jaw-dropping. We were led to believe it had been rectified. It was not. I was pleased to see the recommendation that it be fixed at once and ask you to report back to the citizens every 30 days on your progress. There are many other specific recommendations that I would be pleased to share with the new city manager rather than take more time. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you.
But the bottom line is this: the council should defer any tax increase until department heads scrub the budget by 15% before coming back to the taxpayer with any proposal to take more of their hard-earned money. The council and administration will have done their jobs, the taxpayers will get a fair consideration, and Mayor Buckley will have a chance to live up to one of his central campaign promises: I won't raise taxes. It's a win-win-win for all of us. What could be better than that?
Thank you, Bill. I'm looking forward to eating in your restaurant. So. Alderman Arnett.
Yes, I think that restaurant analogy might have been chosen on purpose, but, Bill, you know we've talked about these things for years and years and years. In fact, in discussions with Julie Mussog, some of the things she ticked off that we really don't have to do right now, although I cringe, is not to make the increased actuarial contribution to the pension plan, not to get in the good habit of trying to build up our contributions for post-employment retirement benefits. Some of the things in the budget we can't avoid, like the $2 million of increased debt service. But, with the OPEB and the pension, I hate to fall back to old ways. Another thing that I've been turning over in my mind is a big chunk of this tax increase is because we're moving from bond funding for streets and big vehicle purchase and so forth to pay-as-you-go. that's actually, the full cost of that is 7.4 cents. We don't have to do that, and that would really dramatically reduce it, but it feels to me like doing those kinds of things is moving in the wrong direction. It's moving away from good discipline. Yeah, we can get that tax rate increase down very low, but it's at the price of falling back into old bad habits. Yes, we can also find cuts. We clearly can't, but somebody can and will have to. But I really dread the thought of going back to old practices and not keeping up with pension, OPEB, and with the street and sidewalk repairs and vehicle replacement.
So, so I'm not challenging you on what you're proposing. To me, the process of a new mayor coming into office and 60, 90 days after he walks in the door, submitting a $120 million budget, which obviously he could not have, and I say this in your defense, he could not have had much of a hand in creating. That process started last fall. You and I have had these discussions in the past saying the time to start budget work is the day after you pass the new budget. It shouldn't wait till the fall, and then here you are scrambling around, another 30 days, and there's this fire drill to get everything done because. So the question of, I don't know Ms. Sutherland. I certainly want to meet her. Everything I've heard about her and read about her experience, I think is excellent. And if she's even half as good as what the press reports are, I think she can really find some true economies. And that's really what you're after. And, to one point that occurred to me, and I hadn't thought of this before, but somebody was saying, you were saying, so how do we find these cuts? It's tough, and we have these constituencies. So may I make a suggestion? You create a citizen budgetary review committee, and you staff it with people in the community. You have a half a dozen people, or pick a number, don't make it 25 people. You have a half a dozen people who can go in with clear eyes, look at department by department, and make recommendations. And I'm not talking about people who are going to go in and blow up the city budget. I'm talking about people who are knowledgeable for the kinds of programs and departments. There are many in this city. I think there's a tremendous wealth of people, as Doug was saying, tremendous wealth of people who are willing to volunteer their time to help you get to that point. So let them go. I've been on transition teams, but I've never been, as Doug was saying, I've never been asked to be in any committee apart from a casual lunch group that I would have with Ross or Fred or somebody else. But the idea is, so we do these transition reports. What happens? They get shelved, and we drag them out, and they almost become background papers. They aren't worth the paper they're written on if they don't get executed. And so what I'm suggesting is, if you're struggling because of political pressure to find programs to either expand, reduce, combine, outsource, whatever the word is, let's get a group of citizens together who can really dig deep in that. I think you get a lot of bang for your buck out of that. And everybody has their own view about what department should be kept, what department shouldn't be kept, and all those things. If you don't mind being here tonight and paying 21% new taxes, then we can have everything. But if that concerns you, including whether you live in an apartment or you live in a house or you're retired, then you do have to do some belt tightening. Everybody does it. It's normal. It's healthy. We don't do it. All that we do is we kind of, we pass the ball to the next. So the idea of whether or not it requires, by the way, somebody asked earlier, I think it may have been Steve Rogers, about whether or not this could be done legislatively. My understanding is under state law, and Mr. City Attorney can correct me, is that the city gets one opportunity to pass a tax. You don't get twice. You can't say, we'll give you part today and come back in October and get the other half. You can't do that. You get one bite at the apple, and that apple, which is why I proposed it as being a 12-month deferring. So you would pass the budget for $106 million. You spend the next 12 months scrutinizing the budget and finding the economies, and you come back next year and you say, you know what, we can do it for 110. you know, whatever the number is. But the point is that, so I think legislatively, I don't know, I'm sure it has to be something done with the city code to do that, because as far as I know, we've never done that before. So there are a lot of opportunities. Yes, sir.
So you see the Citizen Budget Review Committee as being constructed in an entirely different way than the Financial Advisory Commission?
Well, the Financial Advisory Committee is basically plucked out of, citizens from around. Yeah, I guess you could do the same thing. But the point, you know, I think the key is independence, without political affiliation, without political agenda. People who are just looking at it surgically, with the idea of where the changes might be, and make the recommendations. And some of them could be tossed out. And obviously, if it's too painful, you're probably not going to accept any of them. And then they'll all resign, and we'll be back to here again.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Kardash, for your testimony. And I do want to say, regarding your continual resolution for the FY18 budget, I'm not sure we can legally do that. I know there have been some questions about that. And that's not to say I do agree with some of what you've said in terms of, I do wish that we were given information from the departments about their recommended cuts. I wish we had a couple tiers that they could provide us, a 5%, 10% cut. What would you do? Because you're right, they are the experts. They know their departments the best in terms of how to trim it. I don't want to go in there with a hack and just do a hack job and destroy these departments. We've had that happen in the past, and it's not been good for the city. But I do wish that we had information. That'd be good for us. We could then go back to the taxpayers and say, here's what you're telling us you want cuts. Here's what it would mean in services. It would mean a reduction in, who knows, a fire station, a reduction in a fire truck or an ambulance, something along those lines, but at least we'd be able to quantify it for the residents. Because for me personally, I'm not comfortable supporting such a tax increase. I'm not comfortable putting that all on the shoulders of the taxpayer. I do think we need to balance that out with some cuts. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to match it one for one. Here's the increase, here are the cuts. I think of 15%. And even all the departments, I think some of the smaller departments can't necessarily afford to do a 15 or even 10% cut. We have to be really smart with it. But you're right, at this point we have a month left, and I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on this budget. I'm not comfortable with what's being proposed right now. But thank you for your offer of assistance and the information.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask Alderman Payon this question in public, but we do have an audit committee. It's new. I don't have the charter or code handy right now, but we could possibly entertain for at least this first year to have that Citizen Budget Review Committee objective as part of the audit committee. You know, under the umbrella of the audit committee, perhaps we could attack the budget in the first year instead of having, audit committee, Citizen Budgetary Review Committee. Do you know what I mean? We have an audit committee. Let's put it to good use, because we are, as Mr. Smith said, I believe we are at critical mass right now.
So the only concern I would have about
I'm waiting
that,
for the question.
So my question is that something we could entertain, Alderman Payon?
We can entertain it. I'd have to look at the wording of the ordinance. I think I can probably entertain anything that I think will be helpful to achieving our purpose. It's funny you asked me about that. I've received a couple of emails and sent some answers, and I was sending another one as you spoke. We hope to get off the ground within the next few weeks. I've pretty much got the nominees set, and it's a matter of I think council approval and getting to work. Whether we take on that citizen advisory supervisory role or not, I can assure you that we will be working very hard to make sure that things are being done by the best and most professional methods, best practices and professional methods. We will be looking for different, completely legitimate ways of saving money, period. Whether that involves cutting the budget, I think it will, but whether it does or not, I think you can look forward to an improvement of services and for the same or less money. And that's the goal of the audit committee. And I'll be actually meeting tomorrow with a number of people to get the process started. Actually, it's been started for quite some time. It hasn't been the easiest thing in the world to find volunteers for. That is, volunteers who have what I consider to be the proper background. Alderwoman Henson and Alderwoman Rhonda Pendell Charles are fellow representatives of this council on the committee. We'll have 3 civilians that I think have very good backgrounds for the tasks that we have at hand, and we will have somebody from the Financial Advisory Commission on the committee. So we will be raring to go in the very, very near future.
But you had a comment.
Bottom line is yes, I'm happy, happy to take on the citizen, advisory role.
So my only comment would be that I think to get the best value, if you will, from the citizen group, it needs to be independent, and it can't be included with members of the council. I think the extent, let the group work independently with the city manager and whatever internal staff you would need to have access to information, and then have that information brought to the council, rather than have the negotiation, if you will, happen while we're trying to be more scrutinizing. That's my, whether it works under, whether the audit committee is where the document ultimately goes, I don't really have a hard view on that. But rather than have the audit committee be wrapped around, if you will, this citizen review committee, I would recommend that that's not going to be productive, or less so.
So Bill, we've had 1% growth in the last 5 years. What are your thoughts on that?
1% growth in population?
Yeah. So this was presented to us by Planning and
so
Zoning.
the city's 7.5 square miles. And I remember 15 years ago when they were building Acton's Landing, it was all about smart growth. That's the button the state was pushing. So yeah, there are only few places in town where you can develop. Eastport certainly has its challenges right now with new developments being proposed and being challenged by neighbors. Those are issues which I think have to play through the zoning part of it. But one point that I just wanted to, just as an aside, but one of the things that I guess it was 6 or 7 years ago when the city decided to build a water plant, the choices were join with the county for approximately $10 million or build our own for $35 million. And the argument at the time was we need to maintain our independence. We, the city, needs to maintain our independence for the opportunity to annex. If you join with the county, you basically have to live within their rules. You're not going to be annexing anything. If you build a $35 million, so in long story short, we ended up incurring $25 to $30 million more in debt for the purpose of hoping that there's somebody out there that we can annex. That, to me, I'm not sure that that's enough bang for the buck. I haven't heard much about, years ago we talked about we were going to annex Chesapeake Harbor. That didn't happen. Probably 20 years ago we were going to annex Parole, and the county kept it. So there are limited areas where I think you can annex if that's the vehicle. But from a cost perspective, the city has to decide, does it want to spend $35 million for a water system with the hope that someday we're going to annex, or do you spend $10 million? That's a battle which basically came down to council votes.
Well,
sorry,
I need to correct the record
Alderman
on
Annette.
that. The lifetime costs were equal whether we went with the city or we did it ourselves, and It turns out that I think we made a good choice because the county's overtime or overhead charges are far bigger than what we could afford to pay, and I think that not building that water treatment plant, we would have ended up losing money. Yes, I think you're right that there was also consideration about whether the county would stop annexation. Frankly, I think we should have stopped annexation a long time ago, but over the 50-year life, engineering life of the two ways of going, we were indifferent. And since we were indifferent, we chose to do our own and have control of our own destiny.
And that's the cost that you pay for doing everything by yourself. You
Yeah.
incur those extra costs, which manifest themselves in a meeting like tonight.
Well,
But,
once we were indifferent, we made that choice.
But to the mayor's point, there's limited land available for anything except infill properties within town. You could build a couple of townhouses here, or a small-scale apartment, but you're not gonna be building anything like Parole. Not that we want it.
Right. We have room for your new restaurant.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? I declare the public hearing on I-140-18 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is ordinance O-16-18, annual operating budget, fiscal year 2019, for the purpose of adopting an operating budget for the city of Annapolis for fiscal year 2019, appropriating funds for expenditures for fiscal year 2019, defraying all expenses and liabilities of the city of Annapolis and levying same for the purposes specified, specifying certain duties of the Director of Finance, and specifying a rate of interest to be charged upon overdue property taxes.
So the only person signed up to speak was Bill, and I'm sure he doesn't want to come up again. Anybody else like to speak on the budget, please? Okay, I declare the public hearing on O-16-18 open until Monday, May 21st, 2018. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is ordinance O-17-18, capital budget, fiscal year 2019, for the purpose of adopting a capital budget for fiscal year 2019 and appropriating funds for expenditures for the fiscal year 2019 capital budget.
Anybody like to speak on this item? No one has signed up to speak. Thank you. I accept into the record a memorandum to the Annapolis City Council for the Planning Commission dated May 11th, 2018. It's accepted. I declare the public hearing on O-17-18 open until Monday, May 21st, 2018. Mr. City Attorney, next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is Resolution R-13-18, Capital Improvement Program, fiscal years 2019 through 2024, for the purpose of adopting a capital improvement program for fiscal years 2019 through 2024, which is July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2024.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak? Accepted into the record a memorandum to the Annapolis City Council for Planning Commission dated May 11th, 2018. I declare the public hearing on R-13-18 open until Monday, May 21st, 2018. Mr. City Attorney, next item on the agenda.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is Resolution R-14-18, Position Classifications and Pay Plan, for the purpose of approving the FY 2019 Position Classification and Pay Plan effective July 1, 2018.
Anybody would like to speak on this? I declare the public hearing on R-14-18 open until Monday, 21st, 2018. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is Resolution R-15-18, FY 2019 Fees Schedule, effective July 1, 2018, for the purpose of specifying fees that will be charged for the use of city services for FY 2019.
Anyone present who would like to speak? I declare the public hearing on R-15-18 open until Monday, May 21, 2018. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is Resolution R-16-18, FY 2019 Fines Schedule, effective July 1, 2018, for the purpose of specifying fines that will be charged for FY 2019.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak? I declare the public hearing on R-16-18 open until Monday, May 21st, 2018. Mr. City
Mr.
Attorney.
Mayor, may I have got a question?
Councilman Payan.
I assume that you expect the vote on the budget to be June the 11th, is that correct?
18.
I'm sorry?
18.
Okay. All right. I would assume further that you would be amenable to keeping this open, then the public hearing's open until June 11th, or
As long as
really up until the time we vote, is that?
As long as we can, yeah.
Yeah, okay, just making sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please read next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is legislative actions on second readers, beginning with Ordinance O-10-18, Police Advisory Board, for the purpose of establishing the Police Advisory Board, authorizing the powers and duties of the board, and matters generally relating to the Police Advisory Board.
Is there a motion to adopt O-1018 on second reader? Is there a second?
Second? We not?
Discussion?
Discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I think when we had discussion on this, and I can't really remember the context, that this is not what the chief of police was looking for. This is creating what is a fairly formal council committee with the mayor appointing and so on and so forth. And I see somebody's coming to save me, but I don't think this is what we were shooting for, so I'll stop.
I apologize ahead of time for my, my congestion. What might clarify is the chief sought the council to pass an ordinance because there was some public confusion with regard to what he was intending to do. It was his intention to create a very informal advisory board which would allow him to get direct feedback from communities to impact things such as policies and procedures, direct communication with the communities about staffing, best practices, that sort of thing. There was a confusion on the part of some members of the community that what we were doing was creating a review board, which would be an entirely different thing that would review disciplinary matters, for example. That is not at all what the chief had in mind. So it was sent back for that clarification for the council approval. At this point, because it's actually created probably more confusion than existed originally, we certainly wouldn't oppose the passing of the statute as it or the ordinance as it currently exists. We certainly wouldn't at this point object to a no vote and then just send it back to where it came from, which was just the chief's attempt to reach out to the community to achieve community input.
Alderman Savage.
Yes, so I think, don't take this the wrong way, I think all of us, many of us are in support of the concept, but it seemed to me that it ran into conflict with some of our transparency requirements, if it's an official board or commission, which may conflict with some of your confidentiality, not requirements, but things that, you know, I realize some of the cases, some of the information, some of the things being discussed, that would be discussed with the board, would probably best kept confidential. However, I do think there should be some transparency, even if it's the police board, some kind of reporting to the council. But I think that's where the concern, because I'm not sure if this is, like I think Alderman Arnett has said, this sounds like it's something that can be done by the police department. and it doesn't have to be one of our official boards.
Right. That's precisely the confusion
Right.
that was created.
Alderman Arnett?
So, my disposition on this is, I don't think we need an ordinance. I think the chief has the power to do the things that he wants to do of his own volition. And frankly, I think this should either be withdrawn or voted down. It has gotten away from itself, and I think it's gotten tangled into a lot of issues that just won't suit what the chief was after.
Alderman Payon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've talked about this before, and I think when it was first introduced, I said exactly what Alderman Arnett said. I think the chief has the authority to do it. Frankly, if the head of the Department of Public Works wanted to have, an informal advisory committee, I don't think he needs our approval. He can listen to whoever he wants. Now, if you're talking about giving this advisory board specific duties and specific responsibilities and to review certain things, that's a little different. We can't make it part of the police disciplinary process at this point until everybody has received appropriate training, and that doesn't seem to be anything like what this is designed to do. So I think he can do it. I don't think it's a good idea to vote it down, because we voted down and then he appoints a committee after we voted it down. That doesn't, the optics aren't very good on that. I think, if you wanted to either postpone it or withdraw it, I think either one of those two would be the much better alternatives in voting it down, if we're disposed to go along with it. Thank you.
And can I ask you, the graduation that I went to at the police station for the citizen group, is that the group that we're talking about?
There'd be some overlap. There would be some candidates that we would recruit from that group of people, certainly. But there wouldn't be any requirement that there be any special training for this group of people. It would simply be a selected, a pretty decent sampling of the community. And the chief went to great efforts to select people, to at least set the standard, to select people that are from a very diverse group.
Yep. That's what I saw at that group. There was a good diverse range of citizens there, so it looked like they would be able to help you in an advisory capacity. So I would say that, Alderwoman Henson?
I believe Alderwoman Pendle Charles had her hand up as well. I certainly.
You go right ahead, Alderwoman Henson.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. The term board has a legal significance, so I think if we're going to have anything added to the code that is deemed a board, that then comes with those whole bundle of responsibilities that comes with titling yourself as a board. I also have some trepidation about having a group of citizens that are advising, but us not holding them to any ethical standards. We have the ethical standards that are there for other boards and commission members. You have to keep confidential information confidential. You can't do business with the entity that you are advising as well. So I think that some of those ethical standards keep us in a space where we are doing things in a way that we can defend, should we need to defend the process. So I don't know that I love throwing that completely to the wind, but at the same time, I don't think that we can set this up as a board and still accomplish the chief's goals, understanding that sometimes confidentiality in terms of the members and what you discuss is paramount to getting a true dialogue going when you're talking about law enforcement. So on either end of it, I see some issues, but with it as it is currently worded, I don't think that it is something that is going to be manageable or something that's going to serve the chief's goals. So I certainly wouldn't oppose any action that somehow made this not happen in whatever the best, most appropriate way that is.
Yeah.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that Alderwoman Tierney at the last meeting indicated that possibly the word panel would be a police advisory panel. Was that a discussion that you all have had with the chief?
There was a legal issue about if we were to call it something in particular through the power of ordinance.
Right, the legal issue began with the group being called a council, and then we identify the fact that council, as it's referred to in the code, refers to the city council, And then, the notion of a board, and there's boards, committees, and commissions, and there's particular legislation that relates to boards, committees, and commissions. And the spirit of what we've heard tonight is that it does not be a board, committee, or commission as it's formally addressed within the city code. And in that spirit, there was a discussion about, well, let's call them something else, and there could be a panel. And the city code does authorize the police chief to have people that provide input in that would assist in providing police support for the citizens of the city or the residents of the city of Annapolis. So there is a way that within the police chief's authority, he could create such a group of people.
Does the chief have any thoughts or reflections on this piece of legislation?
He had indicated that, what I just testified to, that...
I'm sorry, I was out in the hallway, I
I'm sorry.
apologize.
Yeah, of course. He had indicated that at this point, the confusion that he was attempting to avoid by asking for an ordinance in support has now actually created more confusion than he had hoped to avoid. And so at this point, he wouldn't at all oppose either a withdrawal of it or a no vote on it. But
I'm listening to the comments being made, and I hear Alderwoman Henson. Would those trepidations be allayed if we had a sunset period on this, if it was for a year? Would that satisfy? Not? Okay. Just throwing it out there.
Alderman Arnett?
We can, I'm not sure we can legally withdraw it at this point. It's been moved and seconded. But we could table it, which would make it moot. It would go away. Not postpone, but table. That is a procedure we have that makes it, and it would sine die at the end of the term.
Would that take 90 days or 120 days?
You have a motion on the floor for a second, so you gotta do something with that.
Right, so I would move that we table this.
Procedurally, you have to vote it yes or no. We can't.
No.
There's a vote on the floor.
But you can still vote to table.
There's a motion on the floor.
We have to vote on the motion first and then make a motion to table it. Is that correct?
No.
Too late to table.
No?
Alderman Rodriguez?
You table it right
Thanks.
away.
I guess I'll say something since it was my question that caused all this at the last council meeting, just by wondering what the transparency and meeting requirements were because they were reporting. So I apologize for that, but I guess it's a good thing to dig in deeper. I understand, and I have a little bit of concern with the term like very informal, especially when it comes to a organization that is citizen-driven in collaboration with the police. I think I fully support the concept and the board or the group or whatever. I guess I don't think the solution is there's no solution, so it's either withdraw or take it as it is. I mean, I think during the last month, it was a simple terminology. I'm surprised we didn't come up with a solution to that word that wasn't just withdraw it or kill it. I mean, and also, I guess what would alleviate some of my concerns is just a more detailed kind of like how it would work, because my concern is, since it's very informal, I guess, in nature, what would happen after 1 month, 2 months, then all of a sudden, oh, there's a scheduling conflict, oh, we didn't set a meeting this month, oh, we're not going to do that meeting this month, and all of a sudden it just dissipates. Because from my understanding, this concept came from the need and the drive from the community requesting even more citizen involvement in terms of a civilian review board, which is up here, right? And then we're not there yet, but this was kind of like a first step in the sense of more community engagement, and the police chiefs and the departments moved to community policing. So I guess I just can't see how the solution is just to table it or withdraw it. I think there has to be a solution where it's, I don't know, like the task force that we're doing, I mean, I don't know if that's the term that we can use.
I
the citizen task force.
You could use that term, yeah, the council doesn't need to approve that, though. That could just be established by the police chief.
Okay, but then
Could
maybe you can just walk us through in greater detail what the program is like or would be like, because I guess that's, for at least for me, I don't know the details.
In very broad terms, what the police chief was hoping to do was to open up a forum for candid conversations and discussions with community members that are selected precisely because they're from different constituent groups throughout the city. His intention was to select people that are representative of diverse communities, that could communicate directly with him in a manner that not only do they form a bond with him at a relationship level, but with one another, so they can discuss things candidly in a when I said informal group, I didn't mean to make it sound too loose. I mean, it was his intention to put some structure on it for sure. But on the other hand, he doesn't want to over-formalize it by making it, minutes and bylaws and that sort of thing. That was not his intention. When I meant informal, I meant that. But there would be periodic meetings, for example. He would keep notes on what was said, that sort of thing. And nothing in this would preclude people from communicating anything outside. There would be no confidentiality, for example. There would be no requirement under city. That was one of the concerns was if we create something too formal, we create strictures, ethical dilemmas that would have the exact opposite effect that the chief intended, which was to open communication. So that was the intent. The exact structure of it, the exact composition of it has not yet been determined, but that's it in its most broad.
Yeah, thank you, Major. And that's what I saw from the legislation was the bylaws and rules and the way it would be set up would be discussed and defined. So, I mean, I don't know, I guess I personally like the idea of having some formality to it. Yeah.
Just to offer a couple of suggestions, and this might not be the universe of ideas on ways to approach it, but as has been mentioned, you could suspend further consideration or table the item, or you could, I think the motion that's pending is whether we support the motion to create this, and the lack of votes for that wouldn't necessarily be looked upon as being a motion to kill this idea. So, if it turned out that there were not sufficient votes to proceed with passing that motion, the motion would then not pass, and perhaps you could handle it in a less formal way and have by resolution the council indicating their intent to have the police chief create this advisory group.
Yeah, thank you. I like the idea of a resolution in that sense.
Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, City Attorney. I think that's a great idea, the resolution instead, because I think we could work in some of our other goals, because I entirely support what my colleague, Alderwoman Henson, said about the ethics concern. I think that's something we could possibly work into a resolution. And I also would like to just reiterate that I think some level of reporting, some level of transparency would be I think very productive and helpful to help build the trust. So, not that you necessarily have to report to the entire council, but I think, and I'm not on the committee, but I would feel much better if you would submit maybe quarterly or at least annual reports to the Public Safety Committee, if not the whole council necessarily for confidentiality reasons. But then at least I would feel more secure that my colleagues at least are aware of what's going on with the board or whatever you end up calling it. But yeah, so at this point, I guess I'd be willing to make a motion that we.
So we have a second. We have a second.
I still got a question.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Based on the conversations here, do you think the chief would be comfortable with us taking another look at that, possibly looking at this, possibly doing the route of a resolution?
Yes, ma'am. I believe that would.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure.
Okay, so,
and I think the way that it would need to proceed is there'd have to be some action taken on the current motion and then moving forward to
So-
whatever the council intends.
All those in favor of the current motion, say aye.
The current motion is to pass this? Pass on second reading.
Yeah. All those against?
Aye.
No?
Aye.
So we'll come back with an ordinance next week.
Okay,
A
thank you
resolution-
very much.
Resolution, sorry, yeah.
And you can pass that along, and we'll talk about it later. Thank you.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The next item on the agenda is Resolution R-8-18, amendments to Title 15 of the FY 2018 fee schedule for the purposes of establishing a time frame for when workboat and by-boat watermen may request temporary docking, repealing annual street-end dinghy permit on medical hardship availability, and clarifying criteria for permissible docking of dinghies.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Yes.
Alderman Arnett?
It turns out that this has generated an amazing amount of interest, at least in my ward, about returning to the days when watermen could sell their produce at City Dock. I know that's not necessarily, these are largely technical amendments, but, and I believe it was in 1972 that the city passed an ordinance prohibiting fresh seafood to be sold from workboats on the dock. But I certainly intend to support these changes, but I think part of our concept of City Dock and the revitalization of downtown and so forth, we may regret passing some of these things and may have to come back and re-amend it. I'm not saying that we have a plan right now, but I certainly support the harbor master and her desire to clean up this code. But we may be revisiting this.
Alderman Savage?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Alderman Arnett. I am definitely sympathetic, and I'm in support of this, and if we had some watermen here in the city, we only have one working boat that I believe, in the city, but they don't actually sell anything downtown, but I'd be more than happy to adjust this in the future if we have that demand. I think we would need to do so.
It's not up yet. No, sorry. Okay, Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
It's a resolution on second reader, and it's been seconded, and we're gonna do a roll call.
What?
Yeah, you're right. Mayor Buckley?
Aye.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderman Pendel Charles?
Aye.
Alderman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Rodriguez?
Aye.
Alderwoman Henson? Aye. Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Was that my
Alderman
vote?
Tierney?
Aye.
The motion passes. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The agenda has been completed.
Is there anything else for good order?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Second. It's this week.
This week.
This week.
Well,
You don't deserve any.
it was your request. So you should withdraw that request.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Are we doing a presentation, or town hall meeting for the community, or no?
I think that it was announced in the paper tonight, and we'll
Oh,
make...
okay.
Oh, okay. All right,
The 30th, is that the date?
because I was castigated for breaching that early.
Okay.
As you
All
should
right.
be.
So are
Thank
we
you.
having a work
Right.
session or not?
Okay.
On the budget?
Now can I make the motion?
Can I just have 1 second? So are we gonna have the work session on the budget if you're gonna have the town hall meeting, cause you requested
Oh,
it?
yeah, no, definitely, definitely. We have to, we have to mull over all this information we were given tonight.
I think I made it, but I'll make it again. I move that we adjourn.
Awesome.
Second?
Aye.
Aye.
Everybody who's in the room, campaign fund reports are gonna be due July 1st.